I'm about to turn up the heat now.
Yeah.
I'm about to turn up the heat. And one of the most interesting things about just getting caught up and read about some of the questions I wanted to ask you is people do a really good job, at least on social media, of hiding their flaws and hiding their scars. And one of the things that really like jumped out with me with like getting caught up and just seeing like who's going to be on the show is you talked about the hesitancy of you asking for help. And I want to see, and I want to really challenge you. When was that first time you really knew that you were hindering yourself by not asking for help?
I'm trying to think back to like, I was like, let's walk back like 6 months ago. What did that look like? What was I doing? I was definitely languishing a little bit, and like having that very, real fear of like, I don't really want to ask anyone for this. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to like, I really didn't want to like announce anything about like what happened to me. I think it ended, it was like, trying to think of like who inspired it to, like, I probably had a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about like social media in general and like how to be vulnerable on social media. And I have this like very skewed perspective of like, oh, like I don't want to be showy. And I'm like, well, literally what I do is meant to be shared. It's like meant to be shared. Yeah. It's meant to be talked about. It's meant to be interacted with. But here I am getting in the way of myself of like wanting to be vulnerable through social media, probably because like I'm afraid of being like perceived a certain way or being perceived as like, maybe that's the imposter syndrome coming through. Could be a series of different things, but I think what really changed my perspective, like the kind of like so what piece, like when I first started to like arrive at, I want to do this, like I want to freelance by myself, start my own thing, and like actually lean into it with full intention. Like for me, that was, I took a creative freedom and marketing course with Bima Williams.
Oh, great dude.
Yeah.
So
and
I know him. I worked well with him. When I was doing my first podcast, he came on and I spoke to him and his wife, Kate.
Yeah. Lovely people. Just like
I had interviewed Kate's ice cream and
yeah.
Pop-ups and stuff still. Kate is wonderful. Go check her out on Mississippi. That's now he's in LA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's awesome. Yeah. I'm like, it's such a small like world where I feel like you talk to someone and you're like, oh shoot, some cool.
Yeah. Yeah. He's super cool.
But yeah, I decided to take a class with him because I didn't know how to get out of my own way. And in a way that was like me asking for help. Like just asking for like a little bit of guidance and know how to like get to know myself, honestly. Like I think I was holding back a lot because I didn't know what I was doing and I was scared and I didn't know what it took to like actually build a business. And like part of that was actually like getting real with myself and being like, all right, like what is like the intentionality I want to bring to this? Like what do I want to focus on? What's my niche? Like who are my ideal clients? Like how do I want to promote myself? Like asking myself these like very real questions that are seemingly basic on the outside, but there's a lot of like strategy and thought that goes behind like even just putting out a post on Instagram and like really leaning into that and being okay with like, all right, where's the edge of like, this is like me oversharing or like me like not sharing enough and being inauthentic. Like where's that like authenticity sweet spot, I guess?
No. I'm so glad that you said that because I think that's the piece where I'm trying to focus in on, and I'm so glad you're just speaking to it, because when we get out of our own ways, I think there's like layers to it, and I think it's almost to me like the inverse of Dante's Inferno, where like the first level is like, I acknowledge that this is going on, or maybe I'll not Dante's Inferno, I'll say stage of change, But the reason why I'm saying Dante's Inferno is because there are so many different layers of how we get in our own way, and like it sometimes is a pitfall where I'll just speak more to myself, where I see myself as a captain. I'm leading things, but also there's a reason why you have a navigator. There's a reason why you have the shipwright. There's a reason why you have, the cook, where it's okay. Sometimes the cook's gonna make the decision, and then sometimes maybe the captain's job is just spotlighting the person who doesn't know that they're dope as shit. And I think that is like the levy that you have to really pull from. And I'm just really appreciative that you like talking about that, because I think every day when we wake up, that's where we have to check in of like, what do I need help with? Because the running the jewels and the farces, when we look at these larger companies, this or that, or just people, successful people in general, it's sometimes advertised that I'm self-made. Mm-hmm. And I gravitate more towards like, oh, I did this with a team.
Yes.
That's more realistic.
Exactly. Like yes, you should with like who you are authentically, but you should also stop and ask yourself, like, I love that, like asking yourself like, oh, what are my support systems already that I can tap into? I have friends, I have family, I have partners, I have just so many people in my network, like people I haven't talked to in years. I'm getting on calls with people I haven't talked to in like 7 years and being like, how are you actually doing? Like, just like outreaching to people and knowing that it's like, it's a safe space. Like, I think that's the hardest part, is just like opening the door and being like, I do need help. Like, I am struggling here. And then you realize like they're struggling too. It's like a very human experience. But then how do you talk about that outwardly? That is like, that is the obstacle, and still a funny dance.
For me, I feel like, because I feel like I'm in that space, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm in this space of trying to get myself out the way. And the door is like cracked open, and I peek my head out, but then I close the door back, right? And eventually, like, you're going to have to open the door and walk through it. Otherwise, you're going to stay behind the door where the people on the other side of the door is like their hand out like this. And,
yes.
And so my biggest thing was pride. I think for me, and I think people always talk about get your pride out the way, get your pride out the way, get your pride out the way. But I think you said it. It's like, how do you take that internalization out of yourself and recognize that for being so long, like putting so much pressure on yourself to be able to be or do, right?
Yes.
And I think it's the challenge of stepping outside of that box. Like, okay, let me just step outside this box. Look at myself. All right, self, we're doing all right, but we could be doing better. Let's see how we get there. And it's like, you need help. Everybody needs help. At some point in their life, everybody needed help. Everybody got a hand from somebody to get them to where they are. Doesn't matter how many hands they get. Doesn't matter. Because if you get to where you want to be, you can. Someone told me, one of my teammates told me, they said, and it's big in the rugby culture, to help someone else is to help yourself, and pass that on. And so it's this constant motion of, they're going to need help eventually, you're going to need help eventually, and you just keep passing that. And now it's a train of, at the end of the day, I know that the next person that I give this to is going to give it to somebody else. and that's the goal, and that's the whole purpose, and not looking at it as me versus me, because ultimately that's who it is. It's not you versus someone else, it's you versus you. And so yeah.
And I would say this because I've said this on many shows, or I'm pretty sure people have heard me say this before, but I'm a Christian, and I think one of the things that loses people a lot from understanding from Christianity is not doing that. Where we're focused on so many people who's on damnation and things like that. My mindset's always like, God's gonna take care of that, and knowing the type of, let's just say, God that I serve, that everyone's gonna be taken care of. And I think when we just serve to just serve, like, I just want to help you because I just want to help you, I think that's how, like, truly, like, the world should actually be. No matter what someone expresses, race, creed, religion, sexuality, all the other things, we're just kind of like, if I just do good, because passing and paying that stuff forward just goes a long way. Because I think what a lot of people don't understand is we always point the finger at so many different things, or you could be doing this better, you could be doing this better. But it's like the act of, how can I make space and room to be with people I'm uncomfortable with, make space for people who don't know what they want, and all those different things, because everyone like seeks that perfection out of other people, but we don't hold ourselves to those standards. So it's just kind of like, sometimes, as both of you were speaking, it was on my heart, where it's like, I really wish people would just take their time with each other. Because nobody's perfect. I have my brain farts or brain laps because we all get tunnel vision or main character syndrome.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just the world and just people in general just be a better place if we just seek to understand. Yeah. And when I say seek to understand, so we can be in a space just to exist.
Yes.
Not so I am right, seek so we can both coexist.
You don't have to agree. You don't have to be the same. You can have very different. You can be cut from very different fabrics.
Of course.
And
it's free to be kind.
It's really, yeah. That's it.
It's free to be kind.
That's it.
I wouldn't want my worst enemy to know that he's sitting. Do you need some help? Because I honestly think that's how we're supposed to go, and that also kind of just leads me into